So we're live. I just need to know if anybody can see us or hear us. We're still low tech, so I'm not sure whether or not you can hear me or see me. We'll give it a few minutes. You jump up on Facebook and let us know that you can hear us or see us. I'd appreciate it. If you don't hear, slow.
It's live because I can see you.
Okay. Can you check the sound? Can you? I don't know.
Is there sound on this?
Yeah, there should be in the lower right-hand corner. You should still see the icon there too.
It's live because I can see you.
Okay. Okay. So we do get check the sound.
Sound on this?
Yeah, there should be in the lower right-hand corner. You should still see the icon there. Okay. Well, this will go to the video anyway. It'll be saved YouTube. So we're going to give it a couple more minutes. Now, did you saw it through the Taxidermy Tech website?
Yes.
Okay. Pull up Facebook here. Now, one thing I didn't do with this one is we didn't do a commercial reminder.
Oh, no.
And didn't send out any messages because didn't know where we were going to be in terms of our capability to do this tonight. So I know we've got a few folks signed up, and the good news is this goes into YouTube and it'll be on the site. All right, I'm going to keep my phone on too. And we'll get started. Okay, so we didn't put out any commercial reminders, so I'm not sure if I did a good job this time of keeping everybody up to date on what we were going to do with this particular webinar. I think we put it out there about a month ago, and of course, as you can see, our technical capability hasn't really improved too much. Hopefully, as we continue to do this, we'll have some better capability with our cameras, and we can give you a little bit better than what you get now. But we do got something good for you this evening. My name is Ken Darville. I'm the owner and operator of Expressions of Wildlife Taxidermy and the Taxidermy Tech Vocational Training Programs in Pensacola, Florida. We run classes here a couple times a month. We try to schedule week-long classes. If you're interested in coming, you go to our website at www.taxidermytech.com and you can read all about it. You can go to our Facebook page, Taxidermy Tech. You can follow us on Instagram at Taxidermy Live. We're also on Twitter, I believe it's Taxidermy School. So we're all over the social media, and we're constantly updating the things that we're doing. But we run some really good classes here, and I think that if taxidermy is something that you're interested in, this is a good place to start. A lot of good schools out there. Our program isn't any different, other than we do one-on-one almost exclusively. We'll do other classes with more than one student, but I prefer to do one-on-one. You can email me at ken@citizensportsman.com. That email address is on our retail website, expressionsofwildlife.com, or the taxidermytech.com. Just contact us through Taxidermy Tech or through the Facebook page, and get with me. Give me a phone call. Phone number in the shop, 850-549-3497. You can call us at 844-WILD-ART, and I'll get you some information on our courses if you're interested in coming. What we're going to talk about tonight is consistency and eye sets. Now, last time we actually mounted a deer here. I had put together a skin and got everything ready, and then we come in here and spent about, I think about 2.5, maybe 3 hours mounting a deer head, and got a lot of really good feedback from it. I wanted to break that down to sort of a micro level this time and focus in on the eyes, because I think the eyes is something that can really make or break a mount. And I'm not going to get into some of the different things that we see out there when we walk into a restaurant or walk into somebody's house or walk into another shop. I'll tell you, we've got a lot of really good taxidermists in the town where I am, and there's a lot of good taxidermists all over this country who got it nailed down pretty good. But there's the other side, and it sort of makes you think that instead of trying to give you a deer, the guy is trying to give you a mount, and I'll explain that as we go. That takes us into the live animal standard, which is what I think that we all try to accomplish. But in commercial taxidermy, you just don't have the time to be able to do that. And if you have read my article on our Expressions of Wildlife site, it may be on our Taxidermy Tech site as well. It's called Taxidermy Quality. If you haven't read it, I'd ask you to read it. And it talks about the live animal standard. And it's interesting that the institutional taxidermists, those who are working in universities, those who are working in museums, have always regarded the live animal standard as the standard for taxidermy. And the commercial side of the house has been sort of slow to catch up with that, and with good reason. I mean, if a taxidermist invested the amount of time required to achieve the live animal standard, nobody'd be able to afford it. And he'd be out of business. So, you know, what we have to do is we have to get close. And there's some things that you can look for in mounts. I'm not going to get into a discussion about taxidermy quality. It's a good article. Go to our website and read it. But think about it. Maybe we'll do another seminar or webinar later on taxidermy quality, and we'll break some things down so that you as a taxidermist, you as a new taxidermist, or you as a taxidermist trying to improve your game, or you as a consumer know what you're looking at. So So we try to get as close as we can possibly get. The idea, though, is to be consistent, and that's what this is about tonight. It's about consistency in the eye set. You want to be consistent, and I hear it all the time from the guys who come through here, from the folks who come through the courses here, that the eyes just keep giving them problems. And these are some folks who have not been through before or have not mounted a deer head before, and then some folks who have mounted deer head, even some of those who've been here who've gone back to do it on their own, still having some problems, struggling through that a little bit. And I always sort of say the same thing when they're here. It's a process. It's a process. As you're doing it, it's not necessarily going to look like what you would think that it would look like in the end. It's probably going to look garbled up and not what you had hoped it would look like. And somewhere in that, you'll get lost. And that's why you got to stick with the process. And so what we're going to do here is talk about the process. We're going to talk about basic anatomy. I'm going to break down the eye a little bit for you. Interpreting what you see. A lot of times we don't know what we're looking at. We don't know how to take that and apply that to the mount that we're doing. So we're going to talk about applying what you see, and then we're going to use some geometrical shapes and numbers to be able to help us be consistent in setting our eyes. And then we're going to do it on the form. So I've got a couple things going on here. I've got a slide presentation I'm going to talk through with you a little bit. I'm going to try to share the screen. This does give me the capability to share screen. But if you're watching this from the Taxidermy Tech website, if you look to the left of the screen there, and on the mobiles, I'm not sure, I believe it's above the screen, you're going to see a P, which is a PowerPoint, and you'll see an Adobe sign, PDF sign. That's two different formats that I've uploaded this same PowerPoint presentation that I'm going to try to share with the screen. So in the event that I'm not able to share it to the screen, you can open it up and you can follow along with it there. And I'll talk through each one of those slides. There's some things that I want you to see. I've taken a couple of pictures of deer and I've superimposed some things over there so we can talk to it. We'll start with the eye itself. So give me just a second here and I'm going to share the screen. And I'll ask you to let me know if you can see it. It just messed up right there, going into infinity. All right, so I'm going to give this a second. We've got about I think 15 to 30-second delay. So I'm going to give this a second and let everybody tell me if they can see this and still hear me. What are you seeing on the screen right now?
I'm not seeing, I mean, I'm on the Facebook, but no one's commented.
Can you take a look at the Taxidermy Tech website?
The site itself?
Well, yeah, the webinar page.
Okay.
And start the presentation. See if you can see my screen.
Yes, it's showing a close-up of the eye.
Okay. All right, so you can see the close-up of the eye.
Yes.
Okay, so this is what we're going to do this evening. We're going to go through this presentation. I'm going to superimpose some things on here, and I'll talk you through it. And then we're going to do everything that you see here. We're going to apply to this form. So this is just a deer eye, of course. And here's some different parts of that eye. And I'm going to break them down for you. And then as we progress, you'll see where all this is going to be tied together. Over here on the left, you will start from the bottom. And I think that everybody is familiar with the preorbital gland, the preorbital gland and the tear duct. And that's this lower slot here. And the preorbital gland is at the bottom. And of course, that's where pheromones are secreted. And the lacrimal crease, this area right here, up on the point. And then the carbuncle is this little V-shaped area here in the front. And then we've got our nictitating membrane, which is sort of we call it a windshield wiper, or, third eyelid, some people call it. You don't see that on mounts a lot, not on commercial mounts. You may see it on competition mounts, certainly. Looks nice in a commercial mount as well. But this carbuncle is important. This crease, this lacrimal crease is important. Obviously the tear duct and of course the gland you don't actually see, but you do see the tear duct on your mounts. Over here on the right, we've got the pupil. It's an elongated pupil. You'll see it better here in just a second. The sclera, that's the white portion of the eye. And then the iris, which is the colored portion of the eye on the inside of where the colored portion of the eye actually separates from the sclera. So that's that dark brown area that you see in here. And that's sort of the anatomy of the eye. And I've added another one there that you're not going to find in any anatomy books. I'm sure other people use this as well, but it's the pitch. And the pitch will be important here in a minute as we progress through these diagrams. For me, the pitch represents the highest point of the eyelid. And you see, if you look to the right of that point, it starts going down. If you look to the left, it starts going down. So it represents the highest point of the eyelid over the eyeball. Okay, remember that. All right, so if we apply some geometrical shapes to this, a circle doesn't get it. I put the circle there to show you that. What I'm trying to do here is get you to start seeing the eye in terms of things that are familiar to you. And a circle doesn't get it, though a lot of times, and probably more times than not, when you look at a deer mounted in somebody's house or in a restaurant somewhere, it may be a well-mounted deer, but more times than not, you're going to see a circle. And so you can see here, you're looking at a nice, semi-alert eye, somewhat relaxed, but this is a relaxed deer, but he's looking around him a little bit here. A circle don't get it. So what would get it? What could we superimpose over that eye? Something that's familiar to us. Would it be a square? No, it wouldn't be a square. Would it be a triangle? No, it wouldn't be a triangle. So get yourself, in all aspects of taxidermy, get yourself into the habit of trying to identify things that you're familiar with. I use geometrical shapes a lot, the squares and the lines and the angles, and in this case, a circle. But I'm going to give you another one here that's probably going to more accurately define that eye. And what is that? It's an egg. And when I put that egg in there, and all I did was took a picture of an egg that I took right off of the...
I think we have a problem because I'm checking the volume.
Yeah. And
all I see is the picture of the deer with the circle around the eye.
Okay.
But you're not talking. And so that would lead me to believe that,
Okay, we're going to stop here for a second. I'm going to come back to this. geometrical shapes to this. So it is. A circle doesn't get
Okay, yep.
to us.
I don't know
Would it be a
why.
square? No, it wouldn't be a square. Would it be a triangle? No, it wouldn't be a triangle.
But you can't see you.
Okay, well, we're live right now, so you could see it. I'm gonna go back to.
So
it is. A circle doesn't get. Yeah, you won't see me. All you're gonna see is my shared screen.
Okay.
You
I just
won't
wanted
see
to
me.
make sure that
Okay.
you were coming through clear. Sorry about that.
All right, no worries. Just a little better to be sure.
Right. Sorry about that.
No worries. Just a little better to be sure. Hey, we're rookies at this, okay? So we got to make sure that our equipment's operating because it hadn't been cooperating with us in the past. We'll get better at it. You know, the important thing is that you're learning something from this, and we're learning something from it. And you know, as we continue to do them, they'll get better. We'll understand our equipment a little bit better. But this egg, that egg fits perfectly in there. All I did was took a picture of an egg off the Google search and took out the center, took out the outside, and took out the background, and it just left me with an outline of an egg. And when I put it in that eye, it fit just about perfectly. And so, you know, this is the idea, to find things as you look at different parts of the anatomy, find things that you think about. You know, I look at the eye, I think about an egg, and those things are very important in helping you to apply what you're looking at, to interpret what you see, and then apply it to your mount. This is, you know, one method of interpreting the things that you're looking at, interpreting the reference. So let's take it another step. The pupil. All right, so there's the pupil. I probably got it a little bit long there. You can't see it in there. Very difficult to see it. And when we pull out the glass eyes that we're going to use, or the acrylic eyes that we're going to use on this deer form behind me, we'll probably take out a light and we'll be able to see the pupil. But so what I did here is I just put a little line over there so you could see where the pupil was. Now what we're going to do is knowing where the pupil is, we're going to draw a line all the way through it to show us where the front and back plane of that pupil is. There it is. Now, hang with me here. We're creating something that's going to, I think, that potentially could help you be more consistent with your eye sets. Now we're going to divide the eye into 3 parts. 1, 2, 3. And essentially what I've done is I've drawn a line, a vertical line. 1/3 of the eye, everything to the left of that is section 1. 2/3 of the eye, everything in the center is section 2, and then the last third is 3. Now, if you look at the eyelid, I'm gonna step back. If you look at the eyelid, you can see this angle. And so when we're putting that clay on that form, like we're going to do here in a little while, to build up this eyelid area, we want to put it across there at an angle. And we want to be able to put it across at a similar angle. More importantly, as we mount this deer and the next deer and the next deer, we want to get into a system that is consistent. And so this is how I have interpreted this angle, by drawing this angled line just below that eyelid. But the reference points are at the bottom, what we call the pitch. And you remember the pitch where I showed you in that previous diagram. This point right here, where that number one line is, and where that angle is right there at the pitch. Let me back up one. It's right there at the pitch. So I'll draw my line from the pitch at number 1 to just above the back corner of the eye. Now, I got another eye I'm going to show you here in a minute that's a little bit more relaxed than this one, and that angled line is a little further down. It comes back to the back corner of the eye, and that's what I usually have the students that come through here do. I usually have them draw their line from the pitch of the eye. Remember, the pitch of the eye is at 1/3. It is the highest point of the eyelid on the eye, and I have them bring that diagonal line back to the back corner of the eye. This one is a little bit higher, and I could put 10 different eyes up there, and all 10 of them would be different. But for the sake of consistency, we focus on the back corner of the eye or a little bit above that. And it really depends on what type of attitude you're wanting to get with that eye. And as you do more and more and more and more, you'll get better and better and better and better. All right, so that's what we come up with, and I'm going to show you how to apply that same theory here with the clay. Let's take a look at a different eye. This is one I'm telling you is a little bit more relaxed. You can see that eyelid comes all the way down to the back corner before it starts to come down. So this point coming off the eyelid comes down a little further than, say, the previous one. That eyelid comes down to about here, about 1/3 of the way vertically down the eye, and then it starts going downward. This one comes down a little bit further and then starts coming around. So we applied the same exact diagram to that eye and lowered that angled line. That angled line represents this eyelid here. Now, the eyelid's curved, but what I have found is when we go to try to reproduce this in clay on the form, if we're trying to run that clay around the eye, we're not going to get a consistent eye set. These geometrical shapes, these lines and these numbers are what will help you get a consistent eye set. We're using specific points of reference on an eye. So this would come down a little bit further in the back, and this is the one. This is the particular pose that we do here more than any other. This is what I have the students do here more than any other. And if I got rid of all of this and just had this angled line here, what I would tell you is started at the pitch, which is that 1/3 point there or about, and run it to the back corner of the eye. Draw you a line with that clay. That flat roll of clay should be slightly above the back corner of the pupil. And in this case, we're a little bit above the back corner of the pupil. When you're doing this, and again, we'll do it on the form here in a few minutes, you got to make sure that you keep the line straight, even with the clay, one step at a time. And then we'll build up the clay at the bottom, and then we'll build up the clay in the front corner. But this line is so important. I can't stress it enough how important that line is in getting a consistent eye set. If you throw it up there over the top, if you try to bend it down over the front, you're not going to get a consistent eye set. Now, as you get better at it, and as you get some experience at it, then you can start to do that. But you'll always keep in mind this line. All right, so one other thing that I wanted to point out is over here on the right, if this represents the eyeball, and I'm looking at this from the front now, if this represents the eyeball, I want to be sure that the eyelid starts at about 1/3 horizontally, in other words, this way, down the eye. It's actually probably more about like a quarter, about 25%. This being 25%, halfway being 50, that being 3/4 or 75%, and that being all the way. So if I were to have the bottom of my eyelid at about 1/4 way down the eye when looking at it from the front, that would be about correct. So just a couple of points to throw in there with respect to looking at it from the front. And here's another point. When you do your clay work on your eye, make sure you come back in the end when it's all said and done and take your calipers and measure the eye here, and then go across the other side and measure it here. If you've got one eye open wider than the other, you're going to have a bubba deer, and you don't want a bubba deer. All right, so that's our little slideshow. I'm going to try to share one other thing with you. This is a video of me doing what I'm about to do on this form. Now, it's sort of sloppy, and I mean, it's a pretty clear picture, but it's sort of sloppy. But it will give you an idea, and then of course, it's actually a better video than you're going to see me doing it back here on this form, but you'll have an idea. What I'm doing is setting the eye. I was telling you, you're going to take a flashlight and find the pupil. I've drawn the lines on the form. Now, the idea here is that no matter what the position of the head on a standard shoulder mount, that the pupil be level with the ground, running parallel with the ground. Now, what I've done here is something that I don't normally do, but it's just to sort of illustrate for you what I'm talking about with respect to this line. I put a piece of tape across there, and if you look, you'll see it is at the pitch, which is the front 1/3 of the eye. I've run it all the way across the eye. Are we not sharing?
It's showing you. Do you have a picture up?
Looks like we got technical difficulties again. So I'm going to try to share again. I think we'll be able to do this. Yep. All right, so we're going to share again. Now we'll start over. We're going to get this figured out one day. So there's 1, 2, 3, the front third. This line right here is what I'm talking about when I say the front third. This is the back third. And so this point right here would be the pitch. And I'm using my flashlight. I've drawn my lines on my form, and that's based on that line that's on that form is parallel with the ground. I'm going to line up my pupil with it using the flashlight. And now I'm going to take this piece of tape. And again, this is not something that I typically do, but it's to illustrate for you the line that I'm talking about, this diagonal line that represents the eyelid. And so I put it up there. It's tagged to the back corner of the eye, and it's tagged to just below the pitch. I've actually got it a little lower than I would normally put it, and that's the line you got to keep. Now, when I go putting this clay on here, first off, I'm going to tell you that's too much clay right there. It's one of the biggest mistakes that I see in deer heads in eye work is way too much clay. You can look at the top of that form, and the sculptor has already built up that brow for the most part. We're not trying to build that up as much as we're trying to create an eyelid and connect it with that tissue that the sculptor has put into the form. So I took about half of that off, and I'm sort of flattening it out here. And this is sloppy work. I'm using critter clay here. I think it was getting a little dry on me. But as I peel that off, you see I got a very distinct line, and I want to maintain that line through most of the clay work. I'll start to maneuver it a little bit in the front once we get to the end of the clay work around the eye. So I've taken most of that out, and I'm really just smoothing it up into the brow. Again, big mistake to put too much clay in there, and I do it sometimes too. I have to really think about it. There's been times that I've tried so hard to keep a small amount of clay in there that I've actually put too little clay in there, and I've had to go back and put some more. So it's a fine line, but you want to keep that clay flat, and you want to be able to pull it up into the brown. Don't want to have it bulging. So what I did here is I take another roll of clay, and I'm going to bust about half of this off. I started at the front corner of the eye and just sort of stuck it in that gap. And you notice when I brought it around, I brought it to the back of the eye and then brought it up. I didn't bring it through the eye. I brought it to the back of the eye and I brought it up. If you look at some of your reference pictures here, that's what you're going to see. What that gives us in the back is sort of that ball and socket look. I was actually looking on Google today, looking for a piece of machinery with a ball and socket so I could show you what I was talking about. I couldn't find any good pictures of it, but you can sort of see it. That eye looks like it's just laying in that socket right there, because we've got very little clay here and we've got it flat in the back. And we went to the back and started going up. Now what I'm doing here is just putting a little bit right there in the front to close that gap. It pinches off here where my canicula is and where our lacrimal crease starts. So it's going to give me enough clay there to be able to build that up, and it's going to connect with this brown area. Now you could be asking, well, why not just roll that clay around? And again, the line is very important, especially for you as a new taxidermist, or you as a taxidermist trying to improve your game. You're still working on it a little bit. It's that getting that consistency is what's important here. And once you can do a consistent eye, then you can start, maneuvering around a little bit and sort of formulating your own way. Now I'm going to start connecting this. You'll see it all connect together anyway. I'm going to work this now that I've got the right amount of clay in there and I've got a good line here. I'm going to start working this around. I'm going to start cleaning out my slot. I use a flat paintbrush, good, one of those white, I think, synthetic paintbrushes that are pretty stiff. And I work that get it wet, work it into the glass eye, flatten it out, and then push it into into the clay, where the clay touches the eye, to give me a little bit of a slot there for me to tuck my skin. I like to scuff this up here around the lacrimal crease, and certainly I like to push me a little slot up in there in my tear duct and preorbital gland area. So we've got the basic shape here. Very basic shape. I'm going to start to clean this up a little bit, roll it around. Some might ask, why are you doing all this clay work on the eye before you put the skin on? Because a lot of taxidermists, they don't. You see me here, I'm starting to roll this around, starting to get that attitude that I want in this eye. A lot of folks would ask, why do all this clay work? And then when you put the skin on, it's going to mess it all up. Well, one thing I don't do is, if I can possibly help it, I try not to put a skin on that's too tight anyway. But I do understand that some of our short incisions do go on over the head pretty tight. Here's the thing. You do everything you can to keep it from messing up that clay work. But if it does, what's important is that I know what that eye needs to look like. I know that I've got the right amount of clay in there now, and I can come back after I get that skin back on. And if it's messed up, I can work it back to what I originally created. And for a student coming through here, and for you learning to do this or learning to improve your game, you're going to want to do the same thing. I like the students to, and I'm back, I like the students to do that. if I'm going to expect them to be able to put the skin over and put everything in place and maneuver that eye to give a natural look, then I've got to be sure that they know what it looks like without the skin, that that they're putting the right amount of clay in there. I've got to know that they understand that. Here, when we run our courses, one of the things that we do is this buck right here. This is our second generation of our sculpting buck. Student will spend a good amount of time sculpting ear butts, sculpting different attitudes around the eyes, and once we're confident that they've got that process down, then we move out to mount the deer head. And but I still prefer to put the clay on. I think most people do. They put the clay on, then they put the skin on. But there are some folks who put the skin on and then they tuck some clay up in there. But I like to get that attitude before I put it on. If I mess it up, I know what it looked like before I put it on. I can get that back pretty quickly. So we've talked through this slide presentation. Talked a little bit about the anatomy of the eye. I've shown you my process. There's a lot of different processes out there. I've watched a lot of videos of how other people do it, seen a lot of tutorials, been to a lot of seminars. Everybody's got a way. This just happens to be my way. It works for me. I think it works well for our students. I think I said this in the last webinar. I had a student here this summer trying to do the eye set, and just after having spent a lot of time on the form, form sculpting with the oil-based clay, at some point sort of got lost, and it happens. And we talked through it. We talked through that same process. And again, everything's a process. It's not about what it looks like when you're doing it. It's about following those steps. And in the end, the result is usually pretty good if you stick with the process. And he did. And in the end, his eyes just look really, really good. And I think he got it. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to turn around here. I'm going to do the same thing you just saw in the video. And if I can point out a couple of things, I will along the way. This is not a good video that you're going to watch here. Trying to watch this live. I'm going to try to move this camera in just a little bit closer if I possibly can. I'm going to try to stay out of your way. And we're going to talk through this same process on this deer form. I like to chunk out a little piece of that eye to give, and put a little clay in there to give something for the clay that I'm going to stick in the back of the glass eye to grab hold of. I don't like it suddenly deciding to flop on the floor. You can break these eyes. I think this is a Geometrical eye. Geometrical, I think it's a medium, 32 millimeter. And, if you've never used these eyes, of course, they have a corneal bulge, and it's sort of, it's not hard to figure out where that eyelid needs to lie. The fatter portion of that egg would be towards the front, and that's how you'd set that eye. I can see, without using a light, I can see that pupil pretty well. I'm going to set that eye in there. Now, a lot of times, you can't see it. These are mediums, so I can see it pretty well, and I can see that it is parallel with the floor. Now, if you got your deer leaning forward and the back forward is not straight up and down, of course, it may not be parallel with the floor. It's a good idea to put a level on the back of the form and make sure that it's level, that it's vertically level, and then check your eye to make sure it's parallel with the floor. This would indicate that this deer is looking forward. And so if I was to put those lines that I had on, I don't think my pen's going to ride on there. I don't think you could see it if it did, but I've put put some lines on there. Now, if you remember, I split this eye into 3 parts. I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to split this eye into 3 parts. You can eyeball this, you can measure this, but I should have had a Sharpie here for this. So I'm going to take it, I'm going to put a 1. Let me see if I got a Sharpie. I do not. But I do have a marker. Okay, so I think you can probably see that. I've got these lines here in the front and the back. This front 1/3 represents my pitch. This would be the highest point of the eyelid over the eye. On the left of it, it would start going down. On the right of it, would start going down. So if I draw a line from here to the back corner with my clay, that's what I'm wanting to do. That would be correct. And I'm going to use just a little bit of clay. If I were to guess, I'm not a smoker, but I was at one time. But if I was to guess, this would be about a half, maybe close to half of a cigarette. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stick my clay the front corner. It can run over. That's fine. I'm going to stick it at front corner, and I'm going to stick it at the back corner, and I've got this roll of clay just sort of laying there, but it's laying there straight. I've got my line. So as I'm flattening this out, I'm wanting to sort of push it up. I'm flattening it, I'm pushing it in. I don't want to pull it down as I'm flattening it. I want to sort of push it in and start working it up, keeping this line. I got to keep this line. That's important to me, that line. I don't want that line to go any lower than it is. So it's a lot of little pushing, just a little bit at a time. I get to the back of the eye and I can flatten it out and push it off. Front of the eye, I can flatten it out and push it off. I don't want this area right here in the front, this eyelid, to be too thick. This one's a little bit too thick, so I'm flattening it out and pushing it up. Trying to keep the integrity of my line. I don't want my line to turn into a curve. I want it to stay straight across, straight from the pitch to the back corner. And I start rolling it up onto that brow that the sculptors put into these forms. And if it's too thick in the front, I just push some more of it up. And I keep doing this till I get this entire orbit nice and round. It's not a lot of clay on there. And even so, I still feel like that my eyelid is too thick. When I look at it from the front, it just looks too thick. So I'm going to flatten it out some more and keeping my line. Keep my line. Flatten it out and push it up. All right? Now I'm using oil-based clay here now for this demonstration. Obviously, we're not going to use oil-based clay on a mount. I use critter clay. I think the critter clay probably doesn't shrink as much. I know it doesn't shrink as much as, say, regular potter's clay. Some people use regular potter's clay, and that's, no matter what you do with the eye, you're going to have enough shrinkage that it could create some problems pulling. I have been known to use epoxy sculpt. I actually like using epoxy sculpt and letting it sort of be semi-set as I'm tucking the eyes. But for this demonstration, we're using the oil-based clay, and we do it in the courses when we come in and sculpt the ears and the eyes. So I've got this sort of ball and socket look up here on top. There's not a lot of thickness to this clay. If we might try to get a shot from the front of this with the camera, and we're going to try to get that.
Oh, from the front.
Yeah, just looking straight into it.
Like that?
Yeah, a little bit more this way with it. Yep. Okay, so we're getting you a shot of that. It's going to be posted on the Taxidermy Tech side. We're posting pictures, so make sure you check back to that. Not a lot of clay there, and quite honestly, to me, there's still too much. And I only used maybe a half a cigarette, and I've already taken a bunch of it out. This is that I'm going to use here for the bottom is even less than that. Maybe a third of a cigarette, and rolled out quite a bit thinner. And I'm going to, and I may not have enough on this one. This is a McKenzie form, and this form calls for a 32 millimeter eye. This is, I believe, this is a 69 series, 6900. But I wouldn't swear to it. This is, yep, 69, 722, one left. One of the things I've noticed about the McKenzie forms that could be different, you know, from it certainly is different from some of the other forms that we use. There's a lot more buildup here down at the bottom, and there tends to be a pretty good gap right there. But it's hard to sort of gauge the amount of clay that you need for that using this technique. But I think that about a third, maybe a little bit more than a third of a cigarette is right, and then thin it out a little bit so that it goes all the way across. You'll pick some of it off. So I start in the front corner, and I just sort of lay it into the gap, and I go to the back, and then I go up. Remember, I was talking about that. We go to the back and then go up, and then sort of use your thumb very carefully and pinch it off in the back. And so that's what we get. It's very important, I think, to get a good look, a good relaxed look, or even a good alert look. It's very important that we don't cut off that lower section of the eye. It's important that we come around and down low and then back straight up here in the back, at least to start. We can adjust it once we get it on there. Another thing I don't like about some of these forms is in the back, there's that large shelf. A lot of times I'll sand the back section of the orbit that the sculptor put on there, and that helps me to achieve that, or to better achieve that ball and socket look and not have a bunch of clay bulging out here in the back. And I'll take this off so you can sort of see what I'm talking about. This little ridge back there, to me, just sort of is too much, and I could actually sand that down and I'd be more comfortable with it. I'm not going to endorse any particular forms. I've mounted a lot of deer on these forms. I actually like the form. There's just some things about any form that are sticklers. I haven't found one that has everything that I want in it. So I go back to the back and I go straight up and pinch it off. And then I want to start working it down, flattening it out, and working it down just like I work the top up. Pushing it down flat very carefully, pulling it down. Grabbing the edge and pulling it down, and pulling it right into what the sculptor has already put there for us. If you go putting a lot of clay in there, and he's already sculpted a lot of it for you, you're going to have what I think is typical with taxidermy mounts, particularly around the eyes. You're going to have that big bulky look to the eyes, and most of the time it's too much. Pull this down nice and soft. It's close to the eye. We got a good flat back corner of the eye. So we got that ball and socket look. Maybe we can sort of get a shot up close right here. Keying in right there. All right, so we got this nice tight ball and socket look back here. Now I'm going to take a little piece and stick here in the front. And again, this isn't a lot of clay. It's hard for me to describe, but this is probably about the size of a field pea. Very small, just enough that I can push up into that front corner and start to roll back into that form. I start with the outside and push it down sort of flat and pull it back into that front corner. I'm gonna grab a sculpting tool here real quick. Grab me a little sculpting tool here, and then I just sort of start to lay it in there. And what it's done for me here is it's started to create this front corner where my lacrimal crease starts, and that's what you'll see. You'll start to see this pinched area where our carnuncula is going to be, where our lacrimal crease is, and where our tear duct is. So I'm pulling this and just sort of rolling it back out. And when you're working with water-based clay, you can get you a little paintbrush and some water and just sort of sculpt it with that. Now what I'll do is I'll just start bringing this front corner down and connecting it with this little small area that I just put in here. During this entire process, I've maintained this line right here, and that's what I've been after. I didn't want to turn it into a curve. It will turn into a curve on its own when you put that skin on and you start forming that eye to what you've built here. It won't be too low, it won't be too high. Okay, so now I've got clay in there for my carnuncula. I've got this diagram on the wall here. You can't see it, but if you downloaded it from the Taxidermy Tech site next to the screen that you're watching, that's the same presentation. You can identify with each of these areas that I outlined there. The carnuncula in the front is a little V in the front. The lacrimal crease, and the tear duct area. And that's pretty much it. I've tied these areas in. That's a good eye set, that I'm comfortable with. Maybe at the top, it may be a little bit thick here. I would probably, if I was mounting this deer here tonight, I'd probably thin this down a little bit more because I don't think we need it. Now, some people will go in and go ahead and sculpt their crease, and that's fine, you know, for the purpose of knowing what something looks like before you put the skin on. I actually find that part unnecessary. You're working with soft clay, or maybe you're working with epoxy sculpt or even epoxy clay underneath the skin. You can easily scribe that. What's important is the attitude of the eye and having a process, having a system that you can follow. Same thing every time. No matter what it looks like along the way, if you stick with the process, in the end, it's going to look right. Now, there's a lot of different things you can do if you're into competition taxidermy. My competition taxidermy days ended, 15 years ago. And there's a lot of things that I would do different if I was competing with a deer head. But as far as commercial work, the commercial work's what pays the bills. And I need to be efficient. I need to get as close as I possibly can to that live animal standard without pricing myself out of business. And I need to have a process that can give me some consistency. And that is what it's all about. So that's really all I got for you this evening. Pretty simple, pretty quick. If you have any questions, feel free to post them on the Taxidermy Tech Facebook page. You can email me, ken@citizensportsman.com. Those email addresses and all the rest of our contact information are on our websites. We have two primary websites, one for the school side, one for our retail and wholesale business. The school website is taxidermytech.com, what you should be watching right now. And the retail and wholesale site is expressionsofwildlife.com. We're located in Pensacola, Florida. Would love to hear from some of you. I'd love to get some feedback on our webinar. Would love to hear some of you interested in coming to school. Love to spend some time with you. We got some folks coming. Got another one that's possibly coming this month. I know we've got two planned in January. I've got I think James Kimura's coming in January. Looking forward to him getting down here and spending a few days here with us. And would love to see some more of you out here. I think we've got quite a number of people trying to get in here in March. So when you get into the spring, it's going to get busy. So get us an email. Follow us on Facebook. And if you don't have anything else for me tonight, have a good evening.